Hello and welcome back to our Channel Automation Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Arias, and I'm joined here today by Vic Sun and our special guest, Lisa Jones, who's the Chief IMail Officer for the email service, IMail. It's great to have you both on today, and before we get into the big deal questions, I wanted to learn a little bit about IMail. So what made you most interested in developing this software, Lisa?
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. With IMail, I thought about the idea that we receive all of these emails in our inbox, but yet we lack the ability to be inspired by communication because it's all clutter. So looking for a way to break out from the noise and to add some life to communication. So I was fascinated by technology, and so I signed up for 150 different brands' emails because I wanted to see what do they send out for marketing communications. And what I found out after looking at 150 brands is that I didn't feel special. I didn't feel engaged. All of them were either static, graphic, or a link, or paragraphs of words. And I was like, wow. And I said, well, what if email could be brought to life? And what if email could have a personality? And that's what started me on this journey with IMail.
Super cool. And so tell us a little bit about what makes IMail different. Like, how do you have your emails standing out compared to the other ones?
In consideration that according to Forrester's research, we receive 120 emails or more a day, yet 73% remain unread. The question becomes, how do we all stand out from the clutter? The differentiator that makes IMail unique is that we're able to deliver video up to a full 60 seconds to automatically play in your email and mobile to increase engagement and to deliver storytelling moments. As a result of capturing attention from people seeing it from step one, they're not having to click. I mean, time is valuable. What did I say? The average attention span is like 8 seconds. It's like really short. So if we don't capture attention as soon as someone receives our communication, they either don't read it or they're on to the next. So IMail breaks through that clutter. It's able to deliver at 15 kilobytes in size. You don't have to worry about bandwidth issues. And so it's just a great way to personalize communications with your target audience.
Really cool. So you're saying like with IMail, you're able to kind of have like larger, more dynamic files that you play right within your email. Like, are you being redirected to somewhere else or do you stay in the inbox?
You actually stay in the inbox. We have two versions. It depends on the client and how they want to engage for that call to action. But the 60-second experience stays in the inbox, and that's for all mobile devices, and that's for email. And then we also have another solution, actually, that allows, even when you take that call to action, to remain within that email inbox, which is important as well. So we built IMail to be agnostic. We wanted customers to have the ability to decide which email service platform they preferred. So we're built agnostic so that we can perform with any third-party email system. Yeah, and that 15 kilobytes is, we can take a 300 meg file. That was the problem prior with video and email content was, how do you compress the file? How do you get it to display in the email inbox, whatnot? And we were very fortunate to work with Microsoft in the Innovation Center. We're a Microsoft Mentor Protege company. We discovered how to optimize our technology and our solution and deliver the magic for our customers' inboxes.
How did you come up with your own journey? We have a lot of audiences who don't want to be a TikTok or a YouTube star. They want to enter into actual industries that make a difference in the world. And I know you're doing that. So tell us a little bit about how you got started, what the sacrifices you make, and kind of just something that may inspire the audiences to go and say, you know what, I could do that too.
Absolutely. I appreciate that question because life has a way of helping you to define what your next chapter, what your next steps may be. In my case, I'm originally from Alabama, and I majored in logistics and procurement. My first career move was at NASA in logistics and managing technical resources. I thought that was going to be my long-term career. Somewhere within me, I always knew there was an entrepreneur. I didn't know how she was going to emerge, but I knew she was there. So working at NASA, that was a great career. After a couple of years, I decided to move to Atlanta. and I went to work at AT&T. But before that, it was Singular Wireless on the mobility side. And I got a chance to work with different infrastructure management, and then also in supplier diversity, working with women and diverse suppliers to identify opportunities for them to engage within corporate contracts and opportunities. So along the way, everything is going great. I have this great job, a great career. And as I mentioned, life will redefine your moments. And for me, I have two older sisters. They live in Alabama. And I received a phone call one morning when I was going to work that my mother, not mine, our mother, had passed away at home alone at the age of 61. And in that moment in time, I remembered the impact that communication had on me and how it had on my trajectory going forward. When I went to my mother's services, it was a graveside funeral. And this goes to show you that at any moment in time, things can happen that help you redefine what you're going to do. So that's why I'm mentioning these key points. When I went to my mother's services, in my mind, you all, I was going to get up and speak on her behalf. But it didn't happen that way. I wasn't on the agenda, but it didn't happen that way. And people were going back to their cars in 7 minutes' time. It's like I felt like her services lasted 7 minutes and they were going back to their cars. And I was just thinking, is this what life comes down to, is 7 minutes? Your mother raised 3 daughters, turned successful, and now it's 7 minutes. And I felt that everybody deserves to be celebrated and to be heard. And so the prayer that I made to my mother was that when I go back to Atlanta, I'm going to find a way to start a company. I want it to be an inspiring company. I want it to be global. I want it to deliver value. I want to create a legacy, but I wanted to make up for those 7 minutes of time. The 7 minutes of time served as the catalyst for me determining what my next step was going to be. So when I went back to Atlanta, you all, I thought about communications and how communications are so important. And I said, Vic, I'm going to start a communications business. I'm going to figure out a way to start one. And I said, well, how do we communicate? Verbally, non-verbally, and writing. And I said, well, what else do we do? I said, we email people. Interesting. Who do we email? Internally, externally, in one click is anywhere in the world. I was like, great. I wouldn't have inventory. And that's the juncture at which I signed up for those 150 brands emails, because I needed to see if I'm going to outperform or deliver something different to the global marketplace, because remember, the promise was for it to be global and inspiring, that I needed to understand what are these 150 brands sending out. And so that was my catalyst for starting and branching out, is that life can deliver different things at any moment, but also seek a ray of sunshine out of sometimes tragedy that helps you to continue forward and to deliver greatness to the world.
That is an absolutely fantastic and engaging story. And there's so many different points that I was thinking I had commentary on. The first one was you mentioned singular, and the first thing that popped in my mind was raising the bar, right? Nobody remembers. Yeah, raising the bar.
Yes,
I had
raising
singular.
the bar.
Right. Yeah,
I love that.
No, I mean, you've had quite a journey, and to be able to come out of a tragedy like that, a sudden tragedy that nobody saw coming, and just pick yourself up and then succeed and get stronger from it, that's absolutely amazing. And it's very inspirational to people who are struggling right now in this, climate. The whole world is having a really tough time. And so that's a really great message to deliver to people.
Thank you. And I also wanted to mention with that, in that journey of me discovering what I was going to do next, I still had to pay the bills. I want to mention this part in terms of, deciding when is it time to take the leap or not. I had the idea, I had the concept, I knew what I wanted to do, but there were so many channels to that. So I still stayed in corporate America. So my routine was go to work from 9 to 6, maybe eat from 6 to 7. I'm saying from 7 p.m. to 4 a.m. every day, in the grind and the hustle for years before I left corporate America to take the leap, because I needed to make sure I was financially secure. I needed to make sure I did my analysis and everything there. So I just wanted to state that it's important to have the dream, but have a plan. Have a plan with the dream as well before you take the leap.
Yeah, so was sleeping on the agenda? Or did that just not happen?
That's still a debate right now, but when you have that fire in you, I'm a big Rocky Balboa fan, okay? So I always say it's the eye of the tiger. When you have that eye of the tiger, you're so driven by that passion. You have that resilience just to keep going no matter what. So it's like sleep. Who needs sleep? We can do that later. But yeah, it is important to have a balance, but it was definitely minimal.
So now that you fast forward to when you've built the company, you've created this new technology, and you've talked about like inspiring the world. Like, tell us about some of the brands that you've helped inspire, as well as you've started to help. I think you work with some global brands, and I think our audience would like to kind of, how did you get about coming up with these big enterprises? What are you doing with them now? And, what are your plans in the future for other big enterprises, to kind of, have that same inspiration with iMail?
So with iMail in the marketplace, we work with a lot of enterprise, nonprofit, and emerging brands for that matter, because we all have a message to communicate. On the enterprise side, we work with Delta Airlines as one of our partners. We were named the Catalyst of the Year at Delta for email innovation. So when you think about, it could be several areas, from the customer communications to your events marketing. Maybe your CEO or executive leadership wants to send out a communication and have a call to action button to the invitation, or after the event, senior leadership might want to send out a thank you, but then have a call to action to the survey. So it's a personalized way to send that out. So Delta Airlines, PepsiCo is a customer, and we supported the Super Bowl for communications. That was amazing. Let's see. Also, Microsoft is a customer. We were named Diverse Supplier of the Year finalist for 2022, and that was one of 5 globally. iMail supported the launch of Windows 11, and that was one of the biggest milestones, I want to say. It really made me reflect upon the journey of iMail in terms of the goal of delivering a global product, and to know that the iMail solution and technology was implemented and went out to over 40 million subscribers meant the world to me and our global team. On the nonprofit side, we work with Make-A-Wish. Make-A-Wish on the educational side, we work with Harvard Business School. And then, of course, all of the amazing emerging brands that are communicating with their customers as well. In terms of industries going forward with iMail, the beauty of email is that we all use email. Regardless of what business we're in, it is our responsibility to communicate and to receive communications. Now, we may not want to read all of these emails that come in, but for the ones where you're sending out key messaging, it's a way to engage and inspire and to connect, because we're all seeking human connection. So we are looking at more entertainment for expansion, in healthcare as well. That's very important. Pharmaceutical for medical discoveries that are out there. So it's limitless, really. And that's the exciting part. And after all of these years, Vic and KC, me being the chief iMail officer from the very beginning, I remain inspired by the possibilities, because also an iMail can be in any language, right? So it's not limited to one language. As long as you have your video content, then it can be distributed in one click around the world.
It's pretty miraculous. And I got to say, if I were you, I would be pretty darn proud of how far that you've come as well. So people are typically thinking more about new technologies, especially with like ChatGPT coming in and like all of this like new and exciting tech coming through. Obviously, we're a text platform. And so it's kind of interesting that you do have email still at your first and forefront. Have you noticed any of those hurdles or challenges in your industry with all of these new technologies coming in? Like, is it competition, or do you welcome it?
I think at any moment in time, it's great to have communication channels, because it gives you options. We as humans and people of the world, we like options, and we get to choose the one that is our preference. No different in social media. You choose the ones you like or maybe don't like, and you go with that more so. I think based on the scenario, all of them are very vital and important. From an iMail perspective, we don't see it as competing. We see it as more determining what's your point of engagement. If you met someone at let's say a trade show, what's your first point of contact? Is it going to be a phone call? Is it going to be a text message? Or is it going to be an email? So we look at that as nurturing, or, getting that warm intro after you've met them somewhere at some point. And so that initial point generally is an email versus a phone call, because a phone call may come at the wrong time where the person is busy. Of course, you can ask, are you busy or not? But that's like intrusive. It's disruptive. Now, with the email side, that may or may be disregarded potentially as well. But I tell you what, if you have a way where you're sending out now an email where people can see you, they've met you as the person. It's something about you they'll remember or connect with. And that's that tonality that video can bring into play. And that's what I love about what you all do at Channel Automation as well. It's about how do you create engagement from experiences that we all share. So that's what we see as the nurturing side. Text messaging also has an important role because they're immediate and they can convey short information quickly. So it just depends on the channel and what you're seeking to do.
I think that's really fair, and it's very, it's better than having kind of that versus mentality. And by the way, I know that this episode is probably going to come out after MailCon, but this is just sort of a taste of the full back and forth that we're going to have for channel communications with what we are doing in the modern day. And so if you are interested in what we're talking about today, I do want to put in a plug to listen to what we got going on with MailCon. It'll be a little bit more long form, a little bit more diving deep into that. And so, Vic, Lisa gave a little bit of her opinion on the benefit of text and phone calls. So what do you think email is going to be a good benefit for communication?
Email's not really going to go away. A lot of people were like, oh, emails, there's other better channels. And the reality is email's not going to go anywhere. Like next to direct mail where you receive letters, in your mailbox, I think email is one of those things that's going to stick around. And it's just because it's easy, it's convenient, and, it kind of connects everybody around the globe. Text messaging has its limitations, especially if you're thinking about, texting people overseas, right? Internationally, the cost can be a bit of a barrier for either businesses or for people. Whereas with email, you can email anybody really around the world. You know what I mean? Not everybody has a cell phone around the world, but everybody almost has an email. So I think that's really one of those things there. What I'm curious on is really how, with the new rules, TCPA, as well as, consent-based marketing and the rise of people's need for less waste, right, in their mailboxes, is how companies will respond to that. I think that a lot of companies are so keen on automation and technology that they forget that, the audiences or the people that's going to be receiving these pieces of content are humans. They're not, it's Homo sapiens right now, not Homo economicus. And they still need that engaging, fun, something that's irrational. That's what makes us uniquely human, right, compared to other people. But you go around, even with the large companies, very little is spent, majority of the time, on creative and kind of coming up with engaging things, because their whole goal is automation, deliverability, and, making sure that, you get the email, but then nobody thinks about like, well, what's in the email? So that when I do get it, I want to open it. I want to read it.
Right.
One of the phrases that Vic likes to say, I don't think he said it on the podcast yet, is shit delivered at the speed of light is still going to be shit.
Yeah, that's from Bill Bernbach, and one of my favorite ad masters. And it's just the reality of things, right? You can deliver something that's so fast and so quickly, but if it's crap, it's still going to be crap. You just delivered it really, really quickly. And I think that, in engineering, because, from my background and, from a technology piece, we could really learn from behavioral economics and, and really take a page out of that, right? And not just think about it in economic terms, right? Which is the optimization of value. Um, if you think about people, who go on vacation, right? Let's say you're on a cruise. I would reckon that if you're on a cruise and you're a pretty decent cruise, you're enjoying yourself, I don't think you really care about the big ship that you're on getting to the destination much faster. You know what I mean? And it's like, if that was a trip that was you're enjoying yourself, you'd probably want to slow it down. You know what I mean? So from an engineering standpoint, people could use that and they could benefit from that by re-engineering the experience and focusing on the enjoyability rather than the speed. So, like if you think about railroad, trains, buses, airplanes, if you just made the trip more enjoyable, you put free Wi-Fi, faster Wi-Fi, better food, champagne, better seats, cushions, I would go and argue that people would most likely want the trip. They wouldn't care about you speeding up their trip for another, oh, I can get there an hour earlier, because they're enjoying themselves. You know what I mean? I'd be like, it's okay. It's okay. It's going to take me another 30 minutes to get to my destination because I'm enjoying myself.
It's an experience.
Exactly. It's fundamentally cheaper as well. I think, if you just do the math, it's probably harder to engineer, an airplane where it could get faster from New York to Los Angeles, and try to re-engineer that. You're talking about billions of dollars, but putting in free, fast Wi-Fi, better seat cushions where you could enjoy yourself, better food, I think mathematically you'd go and say, like, that's probably cheaper. You know what I mean? Than having to engineer a faster plane. And I think that sort of thinking is what inspires companies like you, with us. Great technology is only really good when the service is good, the experience is good, because you get really cool technology, really fast technology. But if the experience is crap, I mean, is it really that it's efficient, but is it really that effective?
Agreed. I love that, with enjoyability and not the speed. That should be a metrics in marketing somehow. Like, what would be the barometer for that? Like we talk about open and click-through rates. We should send video out because it's the right thing to do. No one wants to read all of these paragraphs of text, in text messaging or email as well. But I love that you said that. I wrote it down: enjoyability versus the speed. It's all about the experience, for sure.
Yeah. And I think a lot of companies don't realize how cheaper it is.
One of the things that you can look at a metric, especially for playing videos, I know that this is an option, not an email, because, the rest of the world hasn't heard of this awesome email video thing. Well, not the rest of the world, but there's still people who want to know about it. But at least when it comes to you looking at YouTube analytics or looking at TikTok analytics, you can see how long somebody has lingered on your video. Same with your looking around websites. You can see how long people have lingered on your website. And so I think that would be kind of if you wanted to check the enjoyability matrix, right? How long are they looking at it?
Agreed.
Cool things you can get without hooking them up to some sort of science experiment.
Exactly.
It's wonderful that we live now where, like we talked about ChatGPT and how it will create more efficiency, but ChatGPT is not going to come up with new ideas. It's just not. So it's not going to come up with a great video idea. It can write a script maybe and say, hey, write me a script. But it's not going to come up with a new idea that's going to be innately human, it's going to cater to that emotional level. So I think that's where, people should continue to think about, hey, I can be unique, I can be creative. And even if there is technology like ChatGPT that can make things easier for people, you should incorporate that into, your mix. Because I'd hate to see the world come up with faster emails, emails that get delivered 100%. And all I'm really doing at this point is just swiping and deleting faster with my thumb, or maybe or maybe buying an app that says, if I'm not interested in this, delete it for me automatically. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
yeah, I'd like to get less emails, I think, less messaging, if I could, only because of that. But I think most people wouldn't mind getting more if it was more of the things that they'd enjoy.
That they opted in for to receive versus
Yeah,
spam as well. Hmm.
Yeah,
exactly.
we're
Yeah.
probably gonna do a whole episode as far as the updated, most up-to-date news on the TCPA compliance. We've been kind of like teasing it a little bit here and there into the podcast, but it is getting really stringent on what you can send, and email is actually pushing ahead because, text messaging, direct messaging, and calling, that's where all the limitations are happening, right? And you probably have
Mhm.
seen that too, right, Lisa? Where it's like you're
Absolutely.
not getting as hit as hard.
This is, I think, a way for companies to consider services, like Lisa's company, because what you're doing is really you're coming up with this technology, videos that are being played from within the email. You don't have to go and outside of the email. It's very engaging, especially now with all these new rules, TCPA, right? The 10 DLC rule. Lots of companies are going to have a harder time getting their messages delivered and their phone calls, especially with all these new legislation about consent. And then you've got the time zones and the legalities of when you should be making phone calls and text messages. Whereas with emails, there's very little limitations there, right? Because you can, soon as, if I'm at 2 a.m. in the morning in any time zone and I fill out a web form, I can't get a text in a call, but I can get an email, right? And
That you
so
can.
that is
That
that is a major advantage of email. Kind of queuing up all the pros here for Lisa during our
Oh, no.
debate. Yeah, but
We're gonna be
yeah,
doing a whole different thing at
yeah,
MailCon, so we
yeah.
want to make sure
But
to
I
show
I
we do have
figured,
appreciation.
yeah,
I
majority of
love
the
it.
fans there are email fans because it is MailCon in the first place. So most of the people there are going to be email fans. You know what I mean? They're raving fans
It's
of email.
true.
And so I think I have a question on, you know, for what do you think, you work with large enterprises, Lisa, and, what makes those big companies, they care about their brand, they care about their users' experience. How can the small businesses, because, with small businesses, that's where we all started. How
Yes.
can they take a page from the big enterprises playbook and do the same things? And can they afford it? Like, what would be your recommendations for them?
Sure. So for the emerging brands, I would say is one, be sure that your messaging is targeted to your core audience. Not, I mean, if you have a niche audience, you want to make sure that your content is to that niche. But I would say from the email perspective for the small business, I would say that definitely you could have your 60-second communication. But the thing that corporate America does really well, they have people in place to do this, is that they are very concise in that messaging. They don't ramble and run around and try to, buff it. They more so have a concise script. So I was saying being polished in what your script is about your company. You should have a communication and video to thank your customers. Maybe they provided you with the first meeting. You could send an email to thank them after the meeting. Maybe it's for you're going to be at a trade show and you want to invite them to your booth. That's another way. Maybe you're having an event. I would say, what should a small business take out of a corporate experience that I've learned? It's important to experiment, to try different things. If one content set doesn't work, try something additional in a different way, and see where you get your most results. In terms of affordability, we are currently in the process, which is really great, of launching for smaller businesses. I call them emerging businesses, actually, a software as a service model that will allow customers to create an account, click upload their own videos, and it will export the code that you can then take into any third-party system that you prefer. So it will definitely be affordable. We expect to launch it in the next 30 days, which is most exciting. And any way that we can help you, if you just need support to talk about your strategy. We're here to support you in any way that we can, because to Vic's point, we all start at some point. The key point is to get started, right? And we don't have all the answers, but that's why experimentation is so important. Experimentation is so important because it allows you to know what doesn't work, and you can keep going forward with it, and you can try new things. That's how you learn. So don't worry about if you don't have everything figured out. It's fine, because I don't have everything figured out. Vic, do you have everything figured out?
No, not at all. Yeah.
Practically, right? So we
No,
learn
just checking.
together. So we
Yeah.
learn together. So that's what I always say, Vic. I love that question you asked me, because it makes you think about, what would you say? I would say, don't be afraid to experiment and try new things. Regardless if it works or doesn't work, you learn something from it and you keep going. And that's how me, as the chief IML officer, that's how I've been able to build with all these corporate brands, is because I'm focused. I'm laser focused on what is important to them. I'm not as much focused on IML and myself. First, I need to understand them, to understand, what are your goals? What is your mission statement? If I don't know your mission statement, how can I align with your orders? Because I need to know that. So I find that
Yeah.
important. A lot of people don't necessarily care. How do you feel about mission statements, Vic? You think it's important?
I think it's important to just kind of guide the company, but I think after, like, most companies will write something up and then they don't really adhere to it. It's kind of just something that they had to do because they had a business plan. What's interesting about what you said, was about experimentation and testing,
Yes.
and it brings me back to one of the videos that I watched recently about Mr. Beast, who's like, I think he's the biggest, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, influencer
Yeah,
star in the
and
world.
pretty much one of the most well-known people for donating and giving away all of his wealth that he gets from it.
Exactly. Yeah,
Wow.
and it's very interesting. He got a question that was asked in one of these interviews that he did, and it was like, what advice would you give for people who want to be just like you? And he said, don't give up, experiment. Your first 100 videos are going to fail. And he said it so simply. He said, look, if my first 100 plus videos didn't work out, I just kept at it, and I just kept calibrating it. And I just kept adjusting it. And lots of companies miss out on that because
Yes.
they'll test something, and it's the one test, and then they'll go, man, it didn't work.
Right.
And it's like that in itself is data. Like, you get something, you failed on it, you look at it and you go and say, okay, this communication didn't work. What about this didn't work? What can I test now against it? And then you continue calibrating and adjusting. I think that's the piece right there where people say, yeah, we've tested, but testing really means consistently doing it, right?
Exactly.
And failing multiple times. I think a lot of people can take to the to the mentality of a lot of tech companies, especially in Silicon Valley, right? Fail fast, fail often, which is how they really develop platforms and solutions. And I think, if there was one advice I'd like to give myself, if I was listening to this, is those particular failures, and if I'm experimenting, if I'm trying something out, let that be a lesson so that I could now continue my tests and my exploration, right? And not let that deter me from continuing on. And I hope a lot of people, take that advice and they test it out so that they're not so afraid of failing. Because, testing means failing. That really means you've got to get to the failure point. You've got to get to several failure points. And then you go, okay, that's process of elimination. I've tested 50 things. That 51st thing now is the thing that's probably going to work. Right. And I think that's something that to aspire for, with regards to doing better. Just like your big companies that you work for, you work with, they're constantly they didn't get to that concise message that you said. Like, oh, they got it. They've been around for such a long time that they probably didn't get it for such a long time. And then over time, they figured it out. And
PepsiCo
like,
started off serving Dr. Pepper hot. And that is how they marketed it as a tea. Hot
Right.
Dr. Pepper.
Wow.
On the stove.
Imagine that. Imagine that. And I'm reminded actually in us talking about failure and experimentation and learning. I'm reminded of, and I'm fascinated by planes too. So with the Wright brothers in 1903, they were in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, and this is for the very first flight ever. And when I read the story about it, I was like, wow, what's the Wright brothers story? When that first flight flew, there were only 5 people present. It flew for 12 seconds. And these 5 people celebrated. And it's an important message in that to say, today, 12 seconds will be like, what are they doing? 12 seconds doesn't do anything for us, But they celebrated the journey. 12 seconds matters because it was the first time it was in flight. So for whatever your business is, understand that it takes time and it's going to take those iterations and to keep going. And and look at where flight is today. But those 12 seconds, I tell you what, those 5 people celebrated.
I like
That's
it.
fantastic.
I love it.
Honestly,
Yeah.
it's such a good comparison to make. So that's going to be it for us today, failures. Keep at it.
Keep going. Keep going in business like Rocky
Keep
Balboa
on it, failure.
said. Keep going.
You're going to get there.
Yes.
Thank you to all of our listeners. We're always excited to have you back listening to our humble conversion and lead gen based podcast. Regardless if you liked or hated what we had to say today, we do want to hear from you. So shoot us your thoughts at hello@channelautomation.com and subscribe to our podcast on Buzzsprout, YouTube, or any other place that you listen to our podcast, even on the dark web. We'd also love to, if you followed us on social media, and have a great rest of your day. And as always, keep your lead conversion high.